Welcome into this week's episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. My name is Matt Kirkner, your host. I will note for our audience that a few short weeks ago, we had an episode with Todd Wanek, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Ashley Furniture Industries. Upon the completion of that episode, which is all about artificial intelligence, which was incredibly popular, by the way, go back and check it out. We'll link that up in the show notes if you haven't heard it. Incredibly popular episode. And at the very end, when we were done recording, Todd said, Matt, you have to have today's guest on the Tech Ed Podcast. I couldn't agree with Todd more, and that is why we have invited the superintendent of the Whitehall School District, Mike Beighley, to join us today on the Tech Ed Podcast. Smaller district, rural district, doing amazing things in technical education, Industry 4.0, and now artificial intelligence. We're going to get into it with my dear friend, Mike Beighley. Mike, thank you so much for being with us.
Wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
As are we. So familiarize our audience, Mike, if you will, with Whitehall School District. I have visited your district dozens upon dozens of times. I see firsthand the great things happening there, but this will be new to a lot of the people around the globe who tune into the Tech Ed Podcast every week. So tell us all about Whitehall School District.
We are a small rural school, as you said, about 775 students here right in the middle of Trempealeau County, which is directly between Eau Claire and La Crosse on the west central side of the state. We're partnered with some other schools around us and again, as you said, trying to do some really good things for kids.
You certainly are doing huge things, big things for kids, a lot of it around technology. Mike, you have this fascination with technology. You and I have talked about this. You've been way out in front. And to put this into perspective for our listeners, things like, and we've talked about them here on the Tech Ed Podcast, the Mobile Skills Lab that visited several school districts in and around Whitehall, Arcadia, and so on, several other districts involved in that, teaching Industry 4.0 technology. Now you're into artificial intelligence. So let's turn the clock back just a little bit. And I know you've been at this now for 7 or 8 years and maybe talking about it even longer than that. What precipitated this smaller rural school district, literally in so many ways, leading the country in advanced technology?
Well, as you kind of stated, Matt, we have Ashley Furniture literally across the street and right in our backyard in Arcadia, which is their corporate headquarters. And we hosted an event for them, I think it was back in 2016, to make it, to give a little point of reference. And we were allowed to really embed with them as they looked at the future for their company and the things that they were going to go through. And it certainly was an awakening period for us. I think when we looked at it from a school perspective, so looking at what we needed to do to go forward, you have a gut feeling sometimes that things need to change or they have to change or we need to change them. And I think that was kind of that convergence of opportunity meeting necessity. So we really started to dive in and try to figure out, quite frankly, what we didn't know. That was really a lot of it. We started with the premise of, please help us understand what we don't know. Obviously, Ashley's a global company with a ton of connections and doing some phenomenal things as they pioneer so many things at what they do. And we thought that would be a great opportunity to kind of mirror that approach. And especially in rural schools in Wisconsin, our demographics continue to change. So I think, we're really trying to fight for our existence, much like companies have to. So it made sense to try to partner, and we've been really fortunate to have a tremendous relationship with those folks going forward.
You're finding ways to innovate as your community, as education continues to change. You mentioned the relationship with Ashley Furniture. Ashley, of course, the largest manufacturer of furniture in the world, 35,000 plus employees around the globe. So tell me this, Mike, if you don't mind me asking, when you had those initial meetings with the leaders at Ashley Furniture all those years ago, now 8 years ago, who are some of the folks you talked with and what were they telling you in terms of where they thought education had an opportunity to, as you put it, find those spaces where necessity meets opportunity?
I was fortunate enough to make some connections and actually get to spend some time with both Ron and Todd Wanek to start with. So you talk about visionary pioneers. And it really kind of started from a premise of how we in this country tend to think we're ahead in a lot of things. And we aren't. I think we've been able to focus in this world that we don't need a lot from everybody. And all of a sudden, the world started to pick up pace, whether it's emerging markets or demographic changes, the whole concepts of things like that. And I think that then led to a gentleman who I think just the world of, which was Jim Dada. As Ron Wanick put it to me, I'm going to send you my guy. And he really did. I mean, Jim has been just a godsend on so many levels in terms of his knowledge and his experience, and more so his willingness to learn about education. He's a pioneer in the manufacturing field, but applied that same tenacity to learning about education. And then all of those folks opened up their minds, opened up their hearts, opened up their mouths and their ears, quite frankly. And we've had just a tremendous lengthy discussion at depths I think most folks in my gig don't get an opportunity to have.
There's no question about it. Boy, you packed so much into that last answer. Certainly the leadership of people like Ron Wanick and Todd Wanick. Ron, of course, being the founder and chairman of Ashley Furniture Industries. Jim Dada, who is just a terrific personal friend, I know, to both of us. And I remember one of the things you said early on when I forget what event we were speaking at, but somebody asked you for your advice for school districts and educators who are trying to build these kind of partnerships. And one of the things you said was check your agendas at the door. And I have used that probably hundreds of times when I'm counseling industrial and partners and employers as they think about building relationships. What do you mean by that?
When you talk about checking your agenda, so often we talk about partnerships, especially when education meets with employers or manufacturers or businesses, and it becomes, in my opinion, superficial money requests. Ron said to both of us many times, it's easy to ask for money, easy to buy things.
Right.
What you do with them are significant. And I think also starting from a real question perspective of, is what we're doing appropriate? In judging that going forward, I think is really the challenge. We tend to evaluate things looking backwards. Look at the past, evaluate what the future is going to look like. And if we've learned nothing else, especially in the last 8 to 10 months, we're living in a time of convergence with exponential growth scenarios that are coming real quickly. And that's really uncomfortable for education. We don't get to rebuild our materials. We don't get to redo a process. We're dealing with folks' lives,
right,
in lives of children. And so we take that real serious. But I think being able to look at that and say to yourself, what do we really need to do and why are we doing it? To me, that's checking the agenda a little bit and not looking for just handouts or not looking for somebody to fix this for us. We were looking for partnerships.
It's all about building that relationship, talking about what we can do better. And if we can find ways to innovate, eventually somebody's going to find a way to fund that project. Or as I like to put it, if the dream is big enough, the dream will find its money. We just have to dream really, really big. In so many ways, this relationship and this journey that we're talking all about today began with dreaming big. I know you traveled literally the globe with the folks from Ashley Furniture looking at best practices in technical education, STEM education, advanced manufacturing education. And one of the things that led to was this, it's now really iconic. I mean, everybody knows about the Mobile Skills Lab that serviced 4 school districts in and around rural Wisconsin and the western part of the state. So tell our audience a little bit about the Mobile Skills Lab.
Well, we, again, set out to try to create exposure, right? We didn't have a lot of experience with Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, however we want to refer to it, let alone the specific skills that were going to be part of those things. So I think we really, through the partnership, identified early on that we were going to have to start at ground zero. No one was really doing stuff like this, especially at the K-12 level. So we set out to create something that would both generate interest and be substantial in terms of what it offered for kids. I was laughing with Jim Dada the other day, as he's still involved with us, and laughing with him about how many times we kind of readjusted our vision. We were talking first fixed location, then we needed to get more exposure to get a return on investment. We looked at mobile labs and looked at small ones that we could move maybe 4 or 5 times a day is what we were hoping to do, to really move it around. And then ultimately we settled on the fact that we needed a classroom, and we needed it to be big, and we needed it to be bold, and we needed it to draw attention, and then have the substance inside as well, in an atmosphere that wasn't dark, dirty, and dangerous. It was white and bright and really engaging for kids. So that's how we centered with the mobile lab. So, Featherlight designed literally a one-of-a-kind, a big portable classroom that's completely self-contained. And then we housed inside of that Industry 4.0 classes. Partnered with Lab Midwest to create a vision of what that equipment would look like. And then we really set out to build the program. We brought kids through from our 4 schools that we're partnered with, so Blair Taylor Independence, Arcadia, and Whitehall, all small rural schools right around us, and we really moved that lab to all 4 of us to start with. Each one of us had it for a quarter, so we would create exposure, we'd run elementary kids through it, we'd do demonstrations, and then ran middle school classes in that lab along with high school classes. Along the way, we learned quite a bit. We wanted the curriculum attached so that we could be teacher independent a little bit. We could literally put the very best and brightest educators we could in the lab and didn't necessarily need technical experts. So that was one of the tricks. But what we didn't understand or identify real early on was that we still had to kind of create a high school version of what that training looked like or what that curriculum looked like. After 4 or 5 years, would we outgrow the mobile lab? Would we need a fixed location and then be able to send the lab somewhere else to, again, replicate the model that we were building literally from ground zero? Now, 5 years later, here we are. We have a fixed location coming. Mobile lab is moving to the next round, and then all of the fingers that have come out of that work.
I think the point that you just made is that you never stopped. You started with this mobile skills lab, that it was truly innovative. To your point, nobody in K-12 education had been doing anything like this. You wanted to do it big. You wanted to do it bold. You wanted to put the best and brightest teachers in it. You've done all of those things, and you wanted to continue to evolve. And now here you're evolving, right? So the Mobile Skills Lab is going to go on to its next life of inspiring that next generation of STEM and workforce talent in another area. And you've got this incredible fixed space that you've been working on. And I know this vision was something you've had for a while. It is now becoming reality, this emerging technology center that you're going to have right there in Whitehall, Wisconsin. So let's talk about the Emerging Technology Center. I know you've got a tremendous amount of enthusiasm around this next iteration in education there in Whitehall. Mike, tell us about it.
Well, we had an opportunity during the course of evaluating the mobile lab and how to take it to the next level. All of a sudden, a building supply center adjacent to our high school building right across the street and actually joining our parking lot went out of business, and that facility came up for sale. And you talk about a convergence, right? We all of a sudden we saw an opportunity. We're like, wait a minute, we're talking about, have we outgrown the mobile lab? How do we take this programming to the next level? And we're running out of space. I think I mentioned the mobile lab was about 900 square feet of interior space. We were able to secure a facility literally across the road of 18,000 plus square feet.
Wow.
That we are going to turn into an emerging technology lab, technology center. We're working on the name yet, just a little bit, of whether we want it to be separate from what we do or ingrained in what we do. I think we're lending to lab. But you're right, we're extremely excited to take the next level. So we're taking everything we've done, Industry 4.0, mechatronics, SolidWorks, all of those things, adding drones, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, next level computer science, next level artificial intelligence, not so much the shiny new tools that we're going to apply. We're going to teach kids how to make it and how to use it and how to do the data analytics that come with it. Explore blockchain. So all of those things I think are going to be next level and put our kids truly as outliers.
Who would have thought when we started 8-9 years ago, something like that here we would be talking about blockchain in a high school and in a middle school CTE program. It really does speak to how quickly some of these technologies are advancing. It is just kind of interesting how serendipity being what it is. Here you had this great opportunity. You had an incredible 900 square foot mobile skills lab, and now you have an 18,000 square foot, 20 times bigger than what you had in the mobile skills lab. All these opportunities to deliver learning to students. If you don't mind, Mike, and you mentioned a whole number of different technologies, blockchain, artificial intelligence, drones, some Industry 4.0 technology. Are there things that our audience should know about what technologies you're teaching? Go a little bit deeper, particularly on some of those emerging ones like AI, blockchain, and so on.
We're really focused on what the future is going to look like for kids. I try to reference it back. I have a granddaughter who's a kindergartner. She's going to graduate in 2037.
Yeah.
And try to figure out what that future is going to look like for our kids. And,
right.
So we really dove into what the future is going to take. It's going to require drones, right? We're going to see electric vehicles. We're going to see self-driving cars. But I think the piece that gets missed often is we're going to teach the mathematics that goes with that as well. This stuff is all about teachers.
For
Okay.
sure.
We have tremendous teachers. We have some tremendous leaders inside of our staff that have identified that and taken it on as their own passion. I want to prep kids for their future. When we sat down and started to really look at what that emerging technology would look like, what's next, what's not being used necessarily in the US or in our area right now, but what will be. So that's kind of how we got into it. And then what are the skill sets? I think the other important part is that we're really looking at this not so much as fixed programs. A lot of the work that we've had in pathways that we've established over the past few years, I might argue is outdated already. We're looking at future-based things that are going to be skill sets for kids, sensor technology. Okay, we talk about blockchain. As we get into some of the artificial intelligence discussions, one of the big questions we get is who's going to authenticate the information if a teacher's not delivering it?
Right.
Well, the blockchain has potential to do that.
Sure.
So for us as educators to dive into that is uncomfortable, I will tell you. It's not what we necessarily do, but we've been able to leverage. So I think that's a little bit of a start.
Well, the technologies, I mean, they're advancing so quickly. And so you make a really good point, which is that it's almost impossible for anybody to put their arms around. And it's really more about a philosophy of teaching, learning, delivering a student experience. And to that end, this isn't going to look like your typical CTE center, and certainly not taking anything away from some of the great investments that are happening around the Midwest and around the country in CTE, and everybody's finding ways of doing it. But I think one of the biggest pieces of advice is if you're trying to make your CTE program look like CTE looked even 5 or 10 years ago, you're missing a pretty significant opportunity. So tell us about that. You talked about the teachers. We'll get into that. How is this experience? How is this building? How is this center or lab going to differ from the traditional CTE experience?
We are going to run things as individualized as we possibly can. For years, one of the things you mentioned, the travel that we did, we traveled the globe looking at things. And one thing that was abundantly clear is that what we were doing, especially in the US and especially in the Midwest, is we were artificially and unintentionally restricting our kids. Our schedules were controlling what the content for kids could provide. Christoph Osdro, one of the instructors that will be over there, I give him a ton of credit. He walked into my office one day and said, I don't want to have the schedule be a problem.
Right.
If kids want to come to the Emerging Tech Center, we want them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to take them and we will individualize up to 12 to 14 different classes all day long. So we're really going to turn the learning over to the kids. We'll facilitate and support as necessary. We'll direct instruct when they have to with a little bit of structure, but we really are going to blow the roof off some of the Carnegie unit scenarios, the seat time restrictions, the things that, again, I do want to state, and I'll probably say it 4 or 5 times before we're done, just because we're changing doesn't mean what we were doing before was wrong.
Right.
The world has changed.
Exactly.
And we have to adjust with it. And at the same time, I think for the first time, we're starting to get the tools available, the content, the equipment, the vision of what this could look like, the whole convergence model, right? We're getting things to work together. But I think having that individualized approach in running a little bit of a chaotic environment, controlled chaos, learning that focuses on kids being in charge of their own learning.
Right? I love that.
Our entire system is extrinsically motivated, has been forever. We're designed to sort.
Right. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, Industry 2.0, Industry 3.0, we've been designed to sort things out, hierarchy, use grades and things like that to compare kids.
Mm-hmm.
None of that facilitates on maximizing the human experience or maximizing the human capacity. You talk about the meaningful things we've learned, in our interactions, in the wealth of folks we have been exposed to and been able to take pieces and then formulate a vision of what a K-12 situation ought to look like in the U.S. going forward. And I think we're getting there.
This new model is just absolutely music to my ears. To think about being able to go into this world of advancing technologies and have guides like Christoph, and we'll talk about Alex here in just a moment, that can show me how these technologies manifest themselves in the world and how I can interact with those technologies and learn at my own pace and learn in my own way and follow my own interests. And yeah, we can teach math 10, 15,000 different ways. Let's just figure out which way resonates best with the student. So this whole model really is like I said, it's music to my ears. and the teachers that you'll have in this emerging tech center aren't your typical, and I mean that kindly, but aren't your typical tech ed teachers necessarily. Tell us about how the model is going to be different for a teacher, and also what kind of personality traits do you look for in a teacher that can work well in a model like this, Mike?
I think Todd used the word curious in the
He
podcast
did.
episode he did with you
Yep.
quite often, and to me that's exactly what we're looking for is we need passionate educators who want to prepare kids for their future. We that's easy, that's cliche.
Right.
But those that are curious enough to really start digging in and figuring out what that would look like, and at the same time make themselves uncomfortable. Alex Ide, you mentioned, he's the current mobile skills lab instructor who will now be over at the Emerging Tech Center. He's an elementary trained teacher.
Yep.
He's in with a math background, and he was teaching math for us, and all of a sudden the mobile skills lab job popped open. He's like, I kind of like this engineering stuff. What would you think of me jumping in there?
Right.
Well, it was a no-brainer. He's a magnetic personality.
Incredible.
People just gravitate to him. And then Christoph, you mentioned, he's a second career teacher. His first career was computer programming and data analytics.
Yep.
So now you have backgrounds that really gravitate to this. So certainly we have some fortune, and I know folks would say, that not everybody has that. You're right. We didn't either.
Right.
You build a model based on what you think is appropriate for kids, and then hopefully if you're fortunate enough and you can build the right culture, folks want to jump into that, and then that's where we are.
I draw a parallel to our work in industry and in the distribution business and so on, and in manufacturing, and I learned the hard way over time. I was a lot better off finding awesome people and figuring out where they fit than coming up with the perfect fit and then going out and trying to find an amazing person that fit exactly what I was looking for. And in so many ways, you've done exactly that. I know both of these teachers personally, of course, Christoph and Alex both. And I think you nailed it. I mean, Alex has a smile that can light anybody up. I mean, just absolutely a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, has a way of, there's just certain teachers that have a way of getting students excited about whatever the topic is. And Alex is exactly like that. And Christoph, certainly that incredible experience, in his first career that then lends himself to what he's doing now. And I mean, that curiosity word, and you're right, Todd Wanick mentioned that numerous times in terms of how he finds people in his business that are going to lead on artificial intelligence. In really using the same model, you're finding these curious teachers that are willing to break the model up a little bit, be part of something really, really innovative, and not all of them are. And so the fact that you've been able to identify people that can do it and do it well, not just want to do it, but can execute on it, really, really important. And so now you're going to have all these awesome experiences, not just for your students in your high school or your middle school, Mike, but I know you're looking at this as really a K-20 journey, as an understanding of how do we meet, not just our middle school and high school students, but students beyond high school and learners beyond high school, and maybe even students earlier in their academic career. So talk a little bit about the span of learners that you're looking to approach and inspire with this new innovation.
We're looking, Matt, to continue the work we're doing with Vex Robotics in our elementary schools. Christoph has developed and is leading arguably one of, if not the best Vex program in the state when you look at the comprehensive nature of it and really expanding that into our part of the state. We really want to explore and be able to show kids what is out there. One of the hard lessons that we should cover before we get into maybe the specifics is we started in the mobile lab teaching from the ground up. And we figured out real quickly that we lost the kids before they got to the good stuff. We lost their interest. Okay, so we figured out real quickly, we got to look at this macro. If we don't show the kids the big things, the drones, the self-driving vehicles, the robot certification carts, the integrated systems, the tabletop mechatronics scenarios, if we don't show those kids that, they don't become inquisitive to want to learn all the pieces of it. So now I think we're doing the same thing in the elementary. One of the cool things we're going to do at the Emerging Technology Lab is we're going to have live video in there that we're going to be able to pipe to all 4 of our elementary schools in our co-op. So if we're doing cool things over there, we're going to be able to pipe that into TVs in the classrooms or in the school at least and be able to show, here's the world that's out there for kids, and try to then show them what they're capable of, then provide a structure that will free them up to truly be creative. I think one of the scary pieces that we found in all of the digging that we've done is most of the creativity in school is gone by the time kids are 6.
Wow.
That's scary. And then you
It
start
is.
thinking back to the system. Well, that's what we were designed to do. That's
Right.
what the previous system was designed to do, which was create folks that would follow order and do the things and provide discipline for the industries that were there during that time. So I think we've identified that we're really going to take it then to the next level, which is free it up, individualize it, really give kids the big picture version of what's out there in the world, and then teach them to be lifelong learners.
Something occurred to me as you were going through that poignant answer, and that is that, um, you think about all the years in, a typical academic journey, and I'm sitting in algebra and I'm, learning all these equations and so on. And that's all fine. But, the question was always, when am I ever going to use this? And really the same application could be made for a mechatronics program, right? I can teach a student an AC/DC circuit. I can show them what an electric relay is. But if they don't understand the greater context, whether it's automation, robotics, mechatronics, they have a hard time fitting that into A, why am I learning this? And B, what is this for? So creating that context, really, really important. Creating these, myriad experiences for learners is going to be so incredible. And then your final point there about how, the education system that we had was built for a specific point in time. And as industry has changed, as manufacturing has changed, as the economy has changed, and really everything, healthcare, retail, you name it, everything within our entire existence has changed. Now we need this new form of education to be able to meet learners where they are and really meet employers where they are. And that means these emerging technologies like Industry 4.0, like, as you mentioned, smart sensors and smart devices, drones, autonomous vehicles, applied artificial intelligence, applied machine learning. I know this AI thing is something that's absolutely fascinated you really before it became kind of the topic du jour, if you will, in education and beyond over the course of the last 12 months. You've been on this for some time. You've got this AI task force. Tell our audience what this AI task force is all about. What are you up to?
Well, we put together a group of folks. Education by itself tells you we ought to compete for kids and we ought to compete and try to hold things together. Well, we fight that every chance we get. We try to collaborate as much as we possibly can. There were 4 superintendents. We pulled 3 CISA administrators together, along with then a handful of other school leaders, some other superintendents, and we spent a day at Ashley. I think Todd gave us a day and put his team together, and they really laid out things for us in terms of what is happening outside of our world. But then we really went to work. We built a task force, a group of folks that really wanted to collaborate and really wanted to change the structure of what schools look like. So we leaned on those folks to say, okay, you're going to work with all of us, so let's build something of greater capacity than just a small group of the Trimble Valley Cooperative, which are a 4-school co-op. So we went wider. We went unfortunately, in the traditional model, those entities all should compete. So we try to hold information. We try to be first so that we can be the one who has it, and then folks have to buy it and that whole thing. And that model just doesn't work, not with the mode and the speed that we're going to have to change at. So we have some folks at CISA 4 that really jumped in. Brittany Walls, Jenny Riggle, and Christy Tainter, Abby Fernan have really jumped in and done a tremendous amount of research regarding the why. Okay, we all know that you can't really make any major progress or certainly overhaul a system like public education if you don't have a good why. They are digging into what is really happening in our schools. And then we start to figure out what are the tools. We know we have artificial intelligence coming, but we really, again, much like the mobile app, we started at ground zero, which is we're going to blow the system up and figure out what that vision can look like, and then figure out how to pilot or how to model to show that it will work, because it does, and it is in other parts of the world. So we really just put that group together and have collaborated and looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, blended with the humans. How do we let the humans do the human things that they're good at? And how do we support our teachers? Our teachers are working harder than they ever have, and our results are dropping. We're spending more time in ELA and math than we ever have, and we're not getting the results. One of the points that we saw is traditionally when you and I went to school, we might have 2 different grade levels of kids in a classroom.
Right.
Now the initial estimate is 9.
Wow.
We have 9 different performance states that those kids are in. So how does a human try to come up with 9 lesson plans for each lesson, let alone deliver them? Right. So I think those are all different things that the task force is working on.
So, in as much as a key tenet of this is sharing best practices, not keeping that information to yourself, are there any key findings that you've come across, Mike, so far that other K-12 educators would be fascinated to know?
Well, I think the fundamental thing that we've come across is that schools absolutely have to change, and we have to change quickly.
Mhm.
Every month we lose, we're losing more than a month of productivity.
Wow.
So I think trying to figure that piece out and knowing that the machine learning tools aren't quite ready yet.
Mhm.
We're talking about the need for real-time adaptive thematic delivery based on the individual need. You're talking about, you might like cars and I might like basketball. So how does it create some themes like that? I think the willingness to learn, though, and understand that our current system was built for a different time and we got results, but those results don't match anymore what the world requires. And not to mention, growing up in Cornell, Wisconsin, like I did, I didn't think about what kids in China were doing. I didn't think about what kids in India were doing or kids in Africa were doing. Now our kids are going to be collaborating and working with those folks as they should be.
Yep.
And I think all of those things are what I would really start by telling folks. I don't know that we've found any epiphanies yet, other than we absolutely need to change and we need to change quickly.
So as we look to that future over the course of the next several years, right now we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about generative AI. People are still trying to figure out how to get their arms around that. If we had this podcast, let's say it's the middle of 2026 and Mike Beighley and Matt Kirkner are sitting down and having another conversation, what technologies are we going to be thinking about 2 years from now? What do you have on your radar?
I think the augmented reality piece of how we can integrate and really collaborate with folks outside of our regions, even our country, that really enriched environment that lets kids get their hands on things that they can't necessarily. And when I say hands on, it might be with rings on your fingers and a set of glasses or goggles on. But, I think that augmented reality, I think the educational world's going to look chaotic because kids will be learning at their pace and they'll be excited, framed with the perspective of what is the future going to hold for them. We can't pretend that the future's not coming. We can't pretend that driverless Ubers aren't already in our country and other parts of the world.
Rode in one.
Yeah. We can't pretend that flying taxis or flying Ubers aren't coming. We can't pretend those things are not existent because they happen. They're happening in the other parts of the world. So I think that combination of things, the technology will lead us to where we're going. But that's in my head. Our target with our task force work even is fall of 25, is having some degree of massive change in place because we can't afford to wait. We can't study it for 4 years. You've already said it's going to be outdated before we get it done.
Yeah, have some degree of massive change in place literally within 18 months and even less than that. And that's the kind of innovation I think that we have to think about as we look to the future of education. I do have another teacher question, Mike. We talked a little bit about, you've taken math teachers and turned them into technical education and kind of advanced technology, STEM teachers and obviously it takes a teacher that's got an aptitude and an interest and a desire to be part of that transformation. It also takes a degree of training, as we're thinking about finding that curious teacher, as you said, and I agree, that's probably the personality trait that's more important than any other as we look for educators that can evolve into this new world of education, and so many of them are going to have to. But it doesn't happen. Curiosity isn't enough, right? I can be curious about something. It doesn't mean I know it well enough to deliver that learning to a student. So how do you think about training and preparing your educational talent around these new technologies?
I think the major piece is we have to trust our people. I know it's easy to say that everybody trusts everybody, but we don't trust them to take their own learning, their own professional development, and come in and say, this is what I need. You talk about Alex and Christoph. We didn't turn them into anything. We gave them the opportunity because they wanted it, and we supported them. And, even with the Emerging Tech Center, both of them came in and said, we'd like to get a little bit updated training in this thing. Yeah. Absolutely. Then we'll help you and we'll do it, whatever it takes. And I think so long in education, we have been restricted by what we think is possible instead of just finding a way to do it. You jump in with both feet. We do whatever it takes, all the cliches. But the bottom line is we have to commit to a vision, and we have. And then you have to share it. It might be vulnerable. Educational leaders don't necessarily like walking into a room full of their staff members and say, listen, what I'm going to tell you is going to make you uncomfortable, and I don't have any answers for you.
Right.
All I know is we're going to have to change, and we're going to have to change quickly, and we're going to share every piece of information we can with you to a point where you might even become frustrated. But in the meantime, you're frustrated now because of how hard you're working, and you know it's not working. You're really driving yourselves to crisis mode most of the time, burning yourselves out trying to operate what the kids need in a system that isn't designed for it. And I think that's how you really start to build change at our level, is you have to talk to your folks and trust them. Give them the information. Don't worry about giving them the answers. Help enlist them in helping to find the solutions.
Tremendous amounts of lessons to be learned in that regard. I think another great lesson that Whitehall can teach the world and has is this whole idea of building pathways. And you and I have talked a lot about whether it's pathways to your technical colleges, and I know you're really engaged both with, in your case, Chippewa Valley Technical College and Western Technical College. Now with these stackable credentials that can lead to a degree in automation leadership at the University of Wisconsin Stout. Talk a little bit about how you built those incredible partnerships in really a relatively short period of time. I mean, they've always been there, but seeing how they've grown in these last several years.
I think it fits into that same model of we knew we needed a vision, and we restrict kids artificially when we sort them. Grades sort them. They're meant to compare versus one another, not maximizing the human capacity, right? So then how do we do that? How do we apply competencies? How do we apply skills and then provide credit for them? In most of our accreditation structures, I give Stout a ton of credit, and Western and Chippewa Valley a ton of credit. They've found ways to navigate that process to say, how do we do something other than sit in a class for 50 minutes 5 times a week to get 5 credits? The partnerships we've had, you talk about difficult conversations, right? Being uncomfortable. We've all been uncomfortable in those discussions, but I think the passion to provide a vision forward for kids, to go right back to my first conversation with Ron and Todd, it wasn't about specifically Ashley's employees. It was about how do we provide our kids an opportunity to compete in a global environment. Again, start your premise from something like that. It's a whole lot easier to get folks to buy in.
You've said a number of times, and I never get it quite right. You talk about wanting to show your students the world, but show them what's right there in Whitehall as well. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. One of our key components or our key elements of our co-op up here is it's our job to show the kids the world and provide them to go anywhere in it that they want to go, and then give them an awful good reason to stay. Yeah. And I think we're stuck often in this human interaction world that if we restrict kids, they'll stay.
Right.
Well, that doesn't help our country. It doesn't add value to the world, right, if we do that. So how do we maximize that potential? But I really can't say enough about the work you all did with SACA and how that's become the backbone of that UW Stout degree, along with Western and Chippewa Valley. Alex, we mentioned, Alex is gold and silver SACA certified. He can provide those certifications in our Emerging Tech Center. He has provided them in our Mobile Skills Lab. So I think that vision of how do we maximize the human potential has to be our rallying point. And then a quick understanding that the current system isn't designed for that, so we better fix it.
Absolutely. It is really all about maximizing that human potential. And to that end, I know you've got so many student success stories, but are there a couple that really stick out to you, Mike, that you'd like to share with our audience?
We have a young lady that was the only girl in her class as a freshman taking Intro to Mechatronics and was so interested in the context that she went on to take her second course by herself outside the school day. Over the course of the next year or two, she took course 3 and course 4 in our set of Industry 4.0 courses, also got the SolidWorks certification. She earned 4 industry-recognized certifications in 2 years and maxed out the potential of the Mobile Skills Lab. Now you're talking about the human potential.
Right.
And then on the other side of it, there's another one, a young man who's currently at UW Stout that didn't start his academic career real well, and all of a sudden got involved into the Mobile Skills Lab and found his passion, found his niche.
Yeah.
In multiple certifications, youth apprenticeship opportunities in this technology field, now at UW Stout in an engineering program.
Awesome.
You're right. There are dozens, if not hundreds of them.
Right.
And how do you plant a seed in a kid, and how do you measure that? Of what all of a sudden 5 years from now, I got to mess with some 3D printers, and that intrigues me because I have a business opportunity to jump in with a partner in additive manufacturing. So now I have a little bit of background in that. And I think that's what makes it so fun right now. when you have a community and a group and a region and partners that want to really make a meaningful change for kids.
Ron, it's got to be so rewarding as an educator. First of all, that first story being about a girl, a young woman who's now on this new career path, that's music to my, music to my ears, because anytime we hear about, girls and young women being inspired toward careers in advanced manufacturing and automation, that's a huge part of why we do what we do. And then this young man who's in an engineering program and, because he found his spot at the Mobile Skills Lab, and who knows what other path he may have been on, and now he's literally an engineering student at Stout. That's not an academically easy or simple route to be on. So clearly, it's got to be just so rewarding, both for you as the superintendent of the district, and certainly for for your principals and for your teachers who are delivering the learning, to be able to look back and say that student has a totally different life and is going to make a totally different path through their career and impact on the world than they ever would have without that leadership and without that direction, without that inspiration and that experience. Speaking of direction and inspiration and experience, I know you've had all kinds of influences, both personal and professional, on your career. And we love to go back in time, Mike, with our guests on the Tech Ed podcast, and really ask them about that. And it's a question we explore with pretty much every guest that joins us. And it's always our final question. So sadly, we're at the end of our time with this incredible education disruptor, Mike Beighley. But as we close out our time, I want to pose that question to you as well. And let's go back in time and let's talk about inspiration. Let's talk about career direction and life pathways. And if you were to go back to that 15-year-old Mike Beighley growing up in a small rural town, and then your entire life ahead of you, and if you could go back in time and just say, hey, there's some advice I would love to give that 15-year-old version of myself, what would that advice be?
I appreciate the question, first of all, because it's an opportunity for me to, the first thing I do is go back and tell Mr. Westerberg and Mr. Finsis and Mr. Pomeroy, thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be the first thing I would do. But I think the biggest thing is I would tell myself to really engage in learning as opposed to playing the game of school. School was one thing that was relatively easy for me. I could not have to engage at depth in not until my adult professional career have I figured out how to really do that. And I think if I would tell any kid, my own kids, don't play the game.
Yeah.
Go actually dig into what the future is going to look like for you. Don't settle for what I see in front of me. Look out and talk to people, find people you trust and ask them what's out there. What do you think is coming? And really try to prepare yourself for that. And then at the same time, embrace that the only guarantee in life is it's going to change. It's going to change faster than it ever has in our current existence.
And if there's one theme for this entire discussion with Mike Beighley, the superintendent of Whitehall School District, clearly a tremendous innovator, and you're so forward thinking on so many of these things, Mike. But the truth is the world is going to change. And it's changing more quickly today than it ever has. That's been true for a while, but the rate of change now is unprecedented. And so what we're going to see here in the next 1, 3, and 5 years in education is going to be like nothing we've ever seen before. I want to credit you, credit your team, credit your faculty, your community for leading on this, and really in so many ways setting an example of how it doesn't matter where a district is. It doesn't matter necessarily even what their funding model is. It doesn't matter where their students are going after they're finishing their K-12 pathway. The truth of the matter is we can innovate K-12 education. We can do it in huge ways. We can do it quickly. If we look to the future, if we get people excited around us, and if we're not afraid to be a little bit vulnerable and to ask really, really important questions. So I appreciate you answering our really important questions here this morning, Mike, on the Tech Ed podcast. It's been wonderful to have you with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. I really do. Thank you.
Disrupting, innovating, and looking to the future of the world of technical education, STEM education, and K-12 education in general. What a fantastic conversation we had with Mike Beighley, the superintendent of the Whitehall School District. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Mike referenced all kinds of things, the Mobile Skills Lab, the innovation that's happening in his district, and so on. We will link all those references in the show notes. You can find the show notes at techedpodcast.com/Whitehall. That's techedpodcast.com/WHITEHALL. That's where you find all the show notes from the business. And you can find us on social media as well. We are all over social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. Wherever you consume your social, you will find the Tech Ed Podcast. Look for us there. Leave a comment. Connect with us. We would love to know more about you. for that. And for this week on the Tech Ed Podcast, I am Matt Kirkner, your host. Thank you so much for being with us.